What's up, listeners? Thanks for tuning in. It's Kaleb Kraus, back for episode 3 of Racing the Field with Kaleb Kraus. The NCAA Tournament field is quickly thinned as the Sweet 16 has been determined. This past weekend games had plenty of drama across a number of the games. And that should be expected, as it is March Madness, or in some cases, it ended up being March Sadness. On today's episode, we're going to take a look back at everything that went down in the opening rounds, and also take a bit of a deeper dive into the remaining teams and who has a shot to get through the second weekend and on to the Final Four. Before we get into all the crazy upsets that happened, we need to take a look back at the first four in Dayton, because there was plenty of drama there. The Virginia Cavaliers, who were the last team into the NCAA tournament field this year, certainly didn't display much of an offensive threat in their first four matchup with Colorado State, as the Cavaliers, the 2020 NCAA champions, barely managed to put up offense. They only scored 42 points and further seemed to prove why they didn't really belong in the field, as they lost in the play-in to Colorado State, 67-42. Elsewhere in the play-in rounds, Wagner was able to get their first ever NCAA tournament win as they defeated Howard 71-68. Grambling State made a nice run as they outlasted Montana State in a 16-16 matchup, 88-81. Then the Colorado Buffaloes, who were fresh off a loss in the Pac-12 tournament championship game, was able to get the better of Boise State Broncos, 60-53. After Tuesday and Wednesday's playing games, that took us into the first round on Thursday. The opening game did not disappoint, as Michigan State and Mississippi State squared off in the first round in the West region. The Spartans came out hot and didn't look back. They controlled the game the whole time, as they were able to march to a 69-51 win over the 8-seeded Bulldogs of Mississippi State. That led to a crazy matchup in the East region, as Duquesne, a surprise team out of the A-10, as they were able to win the Atlantic 10 Conference Tournament and make the NCAA Tournament for the first time since the late 70s, was able to get themselves an NCAA Tournament victory, as they took down the 6-seeded BYU Cougars, whose three-point prowess, arguably one of the best in the country, could not make shots, and Duquesne got the better of them. That was one of the bigger upsets at the time. Elsewhere, the 3-seed in the Midwest, Creighton, pretty much had an easy job as they took out Akron in the opening round. Long Beach State, with their now fired coach, which was one of the biggest storylines coming into the tournament. Their head coach was, prior to winning their conference tournament, was let go by the team, but he ended up coaching them all the way throughout and led them to the NCAA tournament. So he's certainly going to deserve another shot somewhere, I would hope. But they were no match for the 2-seeded Arizona Wildcats. North Carolina Tar Heels, the number 1 in the West region, went on to beat that 16th-seeded Wagner, who had made the tournament for the first time. The Illinois Fighting Illini made quite easy work of their first-round opponent, Morehead State. Then things started getting a little crazy as upsets started happening late in the afternoon on Thursday. 11th seeded Oregon Ducks was able to take care of business against the 6th seeded South Carolina Gamecocks, who heading into that matchup seemed like one of the better SEC teams in the field, as the SEC certainly did not live up to their hype after results of this weekend. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. Dayton was able to hold off escape against Nevada in their first round matchup. And as for the Colorado State Rams, who was able to get a play-in win over Virginia, their road ended against the Texas Longhorns in the opening round. Which brings us to arguably the biggest upset of the NCAA tournament to this point. The Kentucky Wildcats and head coach John Calipari were flying high coming in against what they thought was well overmatched Oakland Golden Grizzly team. But the Golden Grizzlies had a little something to say about that. Greg Kampe, the head coach for Oakland University in Auburn Hills, Michigan, not Oakland, California, for those listeners that may have been confused, was able to get not only his first NCAA tournament win, but the school's first NCAA tournament win, and it was in a big way over the Kentucky Wildcats. And it shocked the world. Jack Golke, who, like many other people in the history of the NCAA tournament, has turned himself into a March Madness legend. The fifth-year transfer from Hillsdale College came off the bench and made 10 three-pointers. What an incredible game for Golke. There's nothing else you can say. The guy came off the bench and did it. 32 points. All his shots were threes, and he made 10 of them. There was just nothing Kentucky could do, and that loss certainly doesn't seem good for Coach John Calipari's future. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But anyway, the Golden Grizzlies were able to get an 80-76 victory and move on to the second round. After this quick break, we'll continue our talk about first round in the NCAA tournament. And we're back. And there's still plenty of other upsets that went down on in Thursday's action, and some almost upsets. Biggest story of the night on Thursday, this past Thursday, was the fact that the NC State Wolfpack has quickly become a dark horse in this tournament. They proved a lot of people wrong when they were able to go and win 5 games in 5 days in the ACC tournament and stole a bid into this one. And now they find themselves upsetting teams en route to the Sweet 16. I don't know about you listeners, but the Wolfpack, as an 11 seed, might have something to say before this tournament's done and over with. By far the heartbreaker of the opening night of that first round was the final game of the night in the Midwest region. The 4-seeded Kansas Jayhawks took on the 13-seeded Sanford Bulldogs. And boy, did Sanford almost knock out Coach Bill Self and the Jayhawks. Albeit a very controversial ending, as a Jayhawk player went to the rim for a layup, and the ball was swatted away cleanly, as all replays showed, but not according to the officials on that night. And they called a foul in what is arguably the worst call in quite a while in the NCAA tournament, especially in that situation with less than a minute left, in which Sanford could have went to the other end of the floor and won the game. Nonetheless, the foul was called and Kansas shot free throws and ended up escaping by the skin of their teeth, 93-89. The theme of the Friday games was overtime. The first game of the day featured the Northwestern Wildcats and the Florida Atlantic Owls. The Owls, well, they had all the opportunities in the world to make another deep run in this NCAA tournament, but that was all for naught. And their opponent, Northwestern, have been shorthanded throughout the last few weeks, with their starting center being hurt and their two guard being out for the season. But that didn't baffle them one bit. They were able to take down Dusty May's Florida Atlantic Owls in overtime. We'll get back to Dusty May in a bit, because he might have made the biggest shocking news of the weekend. Most of the mid-afternoon games on Friday's schedule went by the book. That was until late in the afternoon, when the SEC struggles continued, as the Auburn Tigers and Florida Gators both lost, albeit simultaneously, in the final seconds of each of their games, by 2 points, in fact. In Auburn's case, they were upset by the 13-seeded Yale Bulldogs. As for the Gators, they came up 2 points short in a very high-scoring affair against Colorado Buffaloes, 102-100. Purdue Boilermakers, we all know about their history the last several years and being one of the top seeds in the tournament, but they had no problems at all getting past Grambling State in their opening round. The last two upsets of the first round went to the spot that usually pulls an upset in the NCAA tournament. A pair of 12 seeds were able to knock off some 5 seeds. James Madison, who less many will forget, opened their season at the Breslin Center in East Lansing, Michigan, and waltzed in there and beat Michigan State to start the campaign. Well, they were able to finish 2-0 against the Big Ten. They were able to bounce Wisconsin in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. I, for one, in my bracket picks, foresaw that happening, so I wasn't one bit shocked. As for a shocking 12-5 matchup, was the last game on Friday night. The number 12 seeded Grand Canyon Antelopes were able to knock out the St. Mary Gales, and they did it pretty soundly. That led into Saturday and Sunday's round of 32 games. And boy, did we have plenty of drama. Arizona was the first team to book its spot in the Sweet 16 They did face a tough challenge from the Dayton Flyers, but they were able to get a 10-point win. That led into the second game of the day, Gonzaga versus Kansas. And in some years, felt like a game that could have been for a national title. That wasn't the case this time, as the Jayhawks looked overpowered, which is shocking given they have had Hunter Dickinson, among others, on their team. But the Gonzaga Bulldogs were able to bounce Bill Self and Dickinson with a double-digit victory. Which brings us to the game that disappointed me the most in this tournament. Michigan State versus North Carolina. Well, the records speak for themselves. The Spartans have never beaten the Tar Heels when they've met in the NCAA tournament, and that held true once again on Saturday, as the Spartans fell 85-69 in the second round, failing to reach the Sweet 16 for the fourth time in 5 years. Boy, did they look like they were bound for something special through the first 12 minutes of the game, first half, when they built a 12-point lead. But it all went off the rails there, and they're certainly going to have to get back to the drawing board. If they want to get any further in the years to come in what is likely the final years of the Tom Izzo era, in my opinion. Oakland's dramatic run came up short in overtime as they met that aforementioned NC State Wolfpack team. And the Wolfpack are still dancing as they've reached the Sweet 16. As for Saturday's games, there wasn't much in terms of upsets. I mean, 6-seeded Clemson taking out the 3-seeded Baylor Bears. That was the biggest shock on Saturday's game. And we're definitely in for some excitement this coming weekend for the Sweet 16 and Elite 8. We'll take a look at the Sweet 16 matchups after this short break. And we're back. And as I said, here's a little look at the matchups in the Sweet 16. Thursday, the West and East regions will decide who makes the Elite 8. First game of the Sweet 16 will see 6-seeded Clemson Tigers out of the ACC against the Pac-12's 2-seeded Arizona Wildcats. The second game on Thursday night, the 5-seeded San Diego State Techs from the Mountain West taking on the number 1 overall seed UConn Huskies from the Big East. Closing out the final 2 games on Thursday evening, we'll see a big battle between the 4-seeded Alabama Crimson Tide from the SEC and the ACC's number 1 seed North Carolina Tar Heels. Final game of the night in what will be a very contested game. We'll see the 3-seeded Illinois Fighting Illini, who are in their first Sweet 16 since 2005, taking on the 2-seeded Iowa State Cyclones out of the Big 12. All 4 of those games will be must-watch, because I can think of 4 teams. Four have a legit shot to win it all. Moving to Friday's matchups. Who would have thunk it? 11-seeded NC State Wolfpack out the ACC will take on the 2-seeded Marquette Golden Eagles and head coach Shaka Smart. Smart was able to lead the Golden Eagles to the Sweet 16 for the first time in a very long time. Not to mention himself, given he hasn't gotten to a Sweet 16 since he went to his first one in 2011 with that famed VCU Rams team. Then there's the matchup to end all matchups. 5-seed Gonzaga Bulldogs will take on number 1 Purdue. And boy, oh boy, who's going to stop Zach Edey? Because the Boilermakers certainly are putting up the points. Heck, they put up over 100 points in their second round matchup with Utah State. It could be the year. The Big Ten's winless drought in the NCAA Tournament has long been mentioned. Don't know. There's definitely not anybody that's going to stop Edey. The final 2 games of the Sweet 16 on Friday night. We'll see 4-seeded Duke take on the 1-seeded Houston in the South. Then 3-seeded Creighton will take on 2-seeded Tennessee. By golly, Rick Barnes didn't choke. Is this the year that the Volunteers finally get back to the Final Four? Time will tell. We're going to take one more break and then finish off today's episode with a little bit of chat about the Big Ten basketball. We'll be right back. And we're back. And we got some big news this weekend amidst all the NCAA tournament action. Florida Atlantic's Dusty May will be taking the Michigan head coach job. Kind of shocking at the time. Kind of random. Middle of nowhere. Solid blue, really. But all I got saying this, he's got some work to do. He's got his work cut out for him. That's for sure. They certainly can't be worse than 8-24 that they just went this past season, right? I will give May credit. He did build up a team through the transfer portal at Florida Atlantic and got him to a Final Four. Plus made the NCAA tournament again this year. We'll see how that works out at Michigan. Elsewhere in the state, the Spartans of Michigan State. They definitely underachieved this year. Starting out the year ranked in the top 5. Made the tournament somehow. Got a 9 seed. Got a nice win over Mississippi State. But couldn't get the job done against the Tar Heels. As an alum, it certainly hurts, but it is what it is. There's so many factors in college basketball now. It's a big mess, in my opinion. The NIL transfer portal is what it is. I'm thankful for Malik Hall and Tyson Walker and Madi Sissoko and Davis Smith and Steven Izzo, AJ Hogard. Could get on your nerves, but they were Spartans. They stayed. They played. They gave it their all. They'll all be missed one way or another. Sign to Jeremy Fears, Xavier Booker, Colin Carr, Garrick Norman in the future. I mean, Tom Izzo did claim after the loss to UNC he's going to find a way to get back to making a deep run or die trying. Good start would be to go out and actually use the portal this offseason. We need a starting big that can score, rebound, do it all, and a good wing. Or we're just going to be stuck in this rut we've been in the last several years. As for the Big Ten and overall, we got two teams left in the big dance, Purdue and Illinois. Both have the pieces, but the Big Ten is on a 24-year NCAA title drought. Is what it is. Michigan State was the last team to win it all, 2000. A lot of teams have gotten to the Final Four in that time. Spartans, Wolverines, Badgers, Buckeyes, Illini even. Purdue hasn't. They ain't even been to the Final Four since 1980. Why should I be buying stock in them now? I'm still not confident the streak is going to end anytime soon. Illinois got there in 05. At least they've gotten to the Sweet 16. They can get that monkey off their back. We're in the Sweet 16, but it's still too early. It's nice to have two teams with a shot to get all the way there, but it's March Madness we're talking about. It's no walk in the park. It is what it is. And with that, my final segment for today's episode, I have a bit of a eulogy. Boo Buie, thanks for ripping Spartan hearts out for so long. But thankfully, your road has ended. You're by far the best player Northwestern has ever had. Sad to see it end. Not really. For all my fellow Spartans, from the bottom of my heart, time to get a job, Boo. Sorry, not sorry. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. It's been another great episode. Catch you on the flip side. Goodbye.